The last rays of sunlight pierced through the dusty windows of Dr. Franklin White's office as Bethany Adams clutched the examination table with white-knuckled hands, her tear-stained face a portrait of devastation. The year was 1878, and at 24 years old, she had just received news that shattered every dream she'd ever held dear. "I'm sorry, Miss Adams," Dr. White said, adjusting his spectacles with a clinical detachment that only deepened her despair. "But given your condition, I can say with certainty that you will never be able to bear children. You'd best accept your fate and consider other paths for your life." Bethany's throat constricted as she fought back another wave of tears. The diagnosis explained so much: the monthly agony that left her bedridden, the unexplained bleeding, the constant fatigue that had plagued her since adolescence. But understanding offered little comfort against the crushing weight of lost possibilities. "Never," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "There must be something." Dr. White shook his head, already gathering his instruments. "Medicine has its limitations, Miss Adams. I suggest you focus on your teaching position. It's respectable work for a woman in your situation." Bethany stumbled from the doctor's office into the dusty main street of Deeming, New Mexico Territory. The frontier town buzzed with its usual afternoon activity: merchants closing shops, miners trudging home from a long day's work, ladies hurrying to finish errands before nightfall. None of them could see that her world had just collapsed. She walked aimlessly, her mind spinning with the doctor's words. At 24, she was already considered past her prime marrying age in Deeming. Most women her age had 2 or 3 children already. Now, knowing what she knew, what man would want her, lost in her thoughts, Bethany didn't notice the approaching rider until his horse nearly trampled her. The massive chestnut stallion reared up at the last moment, its hooves pawing dangerously close to her face. "Whoa, Phoenix!" A deep voice called out as strong hands pulled back on the reins. "Madam, are you trying to get yourself killed?" Bethany looked up into the face of a stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes that studied her with concern from beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. His clothing was travel-stained but of good quality, marking him as neither a common laborer nor one of Deeming's wealthy mine owners. I'm sorry," she stammered, stepping back. "I wasn't watching where I was going." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. He towered over her 5'4" frame, yet there was something gentle in the way he approached. "No harm done," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. "But you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you all right, Miss Adams?" "Bethany Adams," she supplied automatically. "And I'm fine, just distracted." His eyes, startlingly blue against his tanned skin, narrowed slightly as if he didn't believe her. "Name's Henry Cooper, just rode into town." He extended a calloused hand that swallowed hers when she hesitantly accepted it. "Welcome to Deeming, Mr. Cooper," she said, attempting to regain her composure. "If you'll excuse me." Henry Cooper studied her face intently. "You've been crying." The blunt observation broke what remained of Bethany's fragile control. Fresh tears welled in her eyes, and she turned away, mortified to be falling apart before a complete stranger. "Miss Adams," his voice softened, "can I help you home, or to wherever you were heading?" "No," Bethany managed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just need to be alone." "At least let me buy you a cup of coffee," Henry persisted. "The sun's setting, and a lady shouldn't be wandering alone, especially one in distress." Bethany almost refused again, but found herself nodding instead. What did it matter now? Her future stretched before her, empty, childless, likely loveless. One cup of coffee with a kind stranger couldn't make things worse. Henry led his horse and Bethany to a small cafe on the corner of Silver Street. The Bell and Kettle was modest but clean, frequented by the respectable townsfolk rather than the rougher elements that populated Deeming's saloons. A bell tinkled as they entered, and Mrs. Porter, the proprietress, greeted them with raised eyebrows. "Evening, Bethany," she said, her curious gaze shifting between her and the tall stranger. "Mrs. Porter, this is Mr. Cooper. He's new in town," Bethany explained hastily, aware of how their appearance together might fuel gossip. "Just passing through," Henry added, hanging his hat on a nearby rack. "2 coffees, please, madam, and whatever pastries you recommend." They settled at a corner table far from the windows. Bethany stared into her coffee cup as if it might reveal some hidden future, while Henry watched her with quiet intensity. "So," he finally said, "would you like to talk about it?" Bethany glanced up, surprised. "About what? Whatever put that look in your eyes?" "Whatever made you walk into the path of my horse without even noticing." Bethany's hands trembled around her cup. "It's nothing that would interest a stranger." "Try me," he said, leaning forward. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone passing through. No history, no judgment." Perhaps it was his kind eyes, or simply the culmination of too much heartache in one day, but Bethany found herself speaking words she'd never imagined sharing. "I just came from Dr. White's office," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He told me I'll never have children." Henry's expression shifted subtly, but he didn't offer the pitying platitudes she dreaded. Instead, he asked, "And that's something you wanted?" "Children, all my life," Bethany admitted. "I've been teaching at Deeming's schoolhouse for 3 years, and I love my students dearly, but—" She swallowed hard. "I always imagined having a family of my own someday, a husband, children, and now—" "Now Dr. White says it's impossible," Henry finished for her. "He said I should accept my fate," Bethany said bitterly. "As if it were that simple." Henry took a thoughtful sip of his coffee. "Doctors aren't always right, you know." Bethany gave him a sad smile. "This isn't a sprained ankle or a cough, Mr. Cooper. Dr. White says there's something wrong with me, something that can't be fixed. Call me Henry," he said. "And I've learned that many things people say can't be fixed just haven't met the right person willing to try." "Are you a doctor, then?" Bethany asked, momentarily distracted from her grief by his confidence. Henry chuckled, a warm sound that somehow eased the tightness in her chest. "No, madam. Just a rancher by trade. But I've seen enough of life to know that giving up because one person says something's impossible is rarely the right choice." "A rancher," Bethany repeated. "Are you looking to settle in Deeming?" "Maybe," Henry said, his expression thoughtful. "I've been scouting land. There's good grazing country outside town and Deeming's growing. Railroads coming soon, from what I hear." Bethany nodded. "Everyone's talking about it. They say it will change everything." "Change can be good," Henry said, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Sometimes the path we think we're meant to follow turns out not to be the right one at all." They talked until Mrs. Porter began clearing other tables, pointedly signaling closing time. Henry insisted on walking Bethany to her small house near the schoolyard, leading his horse Phoenix behind them. "Thank you," Bethany said when they reached her gate. "For the coffee and for listening," Henry nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "My pleasure, Miss Adams." "Bethany," she corrected him. "If I'm to call you Henry." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features. "Bethany," he repeated, as if testing the sound of her name on his tongue. "I hope to see you again before I leave town. Are you staying long?" The question slipped out before she could consider its propriety. "That depends," Henry said enigmatically. "Good night, Bethany." Things often look brighter in the morning. As she watched his tall figure disappear into the twilight, Bethany wondered if anything would ever look bright again. The next morning, Bethany forced herself through the motions of her daily routine. She dressed carefully in her best teaching dress, a modest navy blue with white piping, pinned her honey brown hair into its usual neat chignon, and tried to prepare her mind for facing 28 children whose innocent faces would only remind her of what she would never have. The school day passed in a blur of arithmetic lessons, reading primers, and geography recitations. If her students noticed her distraction, they didn't comment. Only little Sally Jenkins, a perceptive child of 8, lingered after class to place a wildflower on Bethany's desk. "You look sad, Miss Adams," she said simply, before scampering out to join her waiting brothers. Bethany twirled the purple flower between her fingers, touched by the gesture. She was gathering her materials when a knock at the classroom door startled her. Henry Cooper filled the doorframe, looking even more imposing in the daylight. He'd traded yesterday's travel-worn clothing for clean denims, a pressed white shirt, and a new-looking vest. His dark hair was neatly combed, though a rebellious lock still curled over his forehead. "Mr. Cooper," Bethany said, surprised. "I mean, Henry." "Miss Adams," he returned with a small smile. School day over, Bethany nodded, suddenly conscious of the chalk dust on her hands and the loose strands of hair that had escaped her pins during the day. "Just finished." "What brings you here?" "I wondered if you might show me around town," Henry said. "I've been meeting with the land agent and banker all day, and I could use a more pleasant guide than those money counters." "You're really considering settling here?" Bethany asked, gathering her books to hide her flustered reaction to his unexpected appearance. "Looks that way," Henry confirmed. "Signed papers on a spread about 5 miles north of town this morning. Good water rights, decent grazing land." "Congratulations," Bethany said, genuinely impressed. Most newcomers spent weeks deliberating before committing to deeming. That was quick. "I know what I want when I see it," Henry replied, his gaze steady enough to send warmth rushing to her cheeks. "So, will you show me around? I'd like to know what kind of community I'm joining." Bethany hesitated only briefly. Being seen walking with the same man 2 days in a row would certainly spark gossip in a town deeming size. But Henry's company had been the only bright spot in her otherwise devastating day, and she wasn't quite ready to return to her empty house and the weight of her thoughts. "I'd be happy to," she decided. "Though I should warn you, a tour of deeming won't take very long." Henry's smile widened. "Then perhaps we'll have to walk slowly." They strolled through Deeming's modest business district, Bethany pointing out the mercantile, the assayer's office, the small hotel, and the 3 competing saloons that served the town's miners and cowboys. "Not much yet," Henry observed, "but you can feel the potential. This place will grow." "That's what everyone says, especially since news of the railroad," Bethany agreed. "Though I sometimes miss the quiet town it was when I first arrived. You're not from Deeming originally?" Henry asked as they turned onto a residential street lined with modest homes. "No, I came from Pennsylvania 3 years ago," Bethany explained. "My parents died in a typhoid outbreak, and there was nothing keeping me there. My father's former student had settled here and written about the need for a teacher." "Brave journey for a young woman alone," Henry commented. Bethany shrugged. "I had few options and a teaching certificate. The West needed educators. And do you like it here?" Henry asked, ducking slightly to avoid a low-hanging branch as they passed beneath one of Deeming's few mature trees. "I do," Bethany said thoughtfully. "The people are good, mostly. The children are eager to learn. And there's something about the desert that speaks to me, the vastness, the clarity of the air, the remarkable sunsets." "I know what you mean," Henry agreed. First time I saw a New Mexico sunset, I knew I'd find my way back here someday. Where were you before? Bethany asked, realizing how little she knew about this man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. All over, Henry said. Raised in Texas, fought for the Union in the war, then tried my hand at ranching in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. But this country has been calling me back. You fought in the war, Bethany calculated quickly. You must have been very young. A shadow crossed Henry's face. 16 when I enlisted, lied about my age, wasn't the only one. Bethany wanted to ask more but sensed his reluctance. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the edge of town, where the neat grid of streets gave way to the vast expanse of desert and distant mountains. Beautiful, Henry said softly, gazing at the landscape gilded by the late afternoon sun. Yes, Bethany agreed. This is my favorite view in Deeming. I can see why. Henry turned to her, his expression serious. Bethany, would you join me for dinner tonight? The hotel manager recommended their dining room. The invitation shouldn't have surprised her, yet Bethany found herself momentarily speechless. Dining publicly with a man she just met would certainly set tongues wagging. Yet she found herself oddly unconcerned with Deeming's gossips. I'd like that, she heard herself saying. Henry's smile transformed his face again. Good. I'll call for you at 7 if that suits. As Bethany hurried home to change, she tried to temper the unexpected flutter of excitement in her chest. Henry Cooper was merely being kind to a woman in distress. Nothing more could come of their acquaintance, not with the doctor's diagnosis hanging over her like a death sentence. What man would want a wife who couldn't give him children? Nevertheless, she found herself selecting her best dress, a deep green taffeta. She rarely had occasion to wear, and spending extra time arranging her hair in a more flattering style than her usual severe chignon. When Henry knocked on her door at precisely 7 o'clock, Bethany's breath caught at the sight of him in a formal black suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. He tamed his dark hair with pomade, though that stubborn curl still defied containment. More surprising was the small bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. You look beautiful, he said simply, offering her the flowers. Thank you, Bethany murmured, accepting them with flustered pleasure. These are lovely. Let me put them in water before we go. At the hotel dining room, the finest establishment Deeming could boast, Henry guided her to a corner table set with actual linen and the hotel's best china. Bethany was acutely aware of the curious glances from other diners, including Mrs. Campbell, the banker's wife, whose raised eyebrows clearly telegraphed her surprise at seeing the schoolteacher dining with a handsome stranger. Everyone staring, Bethany whispered after the waiter had taken their orders. Henry glanced around the room with casual confidence. Small towns. Can't do anything without an audience. Does it bother you? Bethany asked. Not particularly, Henry replied. Does it bother you? Bethany considered the question honestly. I suppose it should. A teacher is expected to maintain certain standards of behavior. And dining with a respectable rancher violates those standards, Henry asked, a hint of amusement in his eyes. A rancher I've known for exactly 1 day, Bethany pointed out. Ah, well, there is that, Henry conceded with a smile. If it helps, I promise my intentions are honorable. The meal was the finest Bethany had enjoyed in months. Henry proved to be a fascinating conversationalist, sharing stories of his travels across the Western Territories without dominating the discussion. He asked thoughtful questions about her teaching, her life in Pennsylvania, and her interests beyond the classroom. You're easy to talk to, Bethany remarked as they lingered over apple pie and coffee. I've told you things I've never shared with anyone in Deeming. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps, Henry said. Speaking of which, Have you sought a second opinion about your condition?" The abrupt return to her most painful subject startled Bethany. "What, you said, doctor?" "White told you that you couldn't have children," Henry said, his voice low to prevent others from overhearing. "Have you consulted any other doctors?" "There is no other doctor in Deeming," Bethany replied. "The nearest is in Las Cruces, and that's a considerable journey." "Worth it, though, isn't it?" Henry pressed. "For something this important to you." Bethany stirred her coffee absently. "Perhaps. But Dr. White seemed very certain, and even if I could make the journey, what's the point of hearing the same verdict twice?" "Because doctors can be wrong," Henry insisted. "And different doctors have different knowledge, different experiences." "You sound like you have personal experience with this," Bethany observed. Henry's expression grew somber. "My sister was told she would never walk again after a riding accident. 4 doctors said the same thing. The 5th had different ideas. She walked down the aisle at her wedding 3 years later." "That's remarkable," Bethany said. "But this is different. How do you know unless you try?" Henry challenged gently. "What have you got to lose?" The question hung between them as the waiter cleared their plates. What did she have to lose? Only the last fragile thread of hope she was clinging to. When Henry escorted her home, the night was alive with stars and the soft chirping of desert insects. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager to end the evening. "Thank you for dinner," Bethany said as they reached her gate. "It was lovely." "It was my pleasure," Henry replied, his tall form silhouetted against the moonlit street. "Bethany, I'd like to see you again. Regularly." Bethany's heart quickened. "Henry, I'm not sure that's wise. You don't really know me, and after what I told you yesterday—" "You told me about a medical condition," Henry interrupted. "Not who you are as a person, and who you are interests me very much." "But any man would want children," Bethany protested. "I can't let me worry about what I want," Henry said, stepping closer. "All I'm asking for right now is the chance to know you better. Nothing more." Bethany looked up into his face, illuminated by the soft glow of her porch lantern. His expression was earnest, his blue eyes reflecting a sincerity that made it difficult to doubt him. "All right," she agreed softly. Henry's smile was worth the risk. "Good. I'll be busy at the ranch for the next few days, getting things organized, hiring hands. But I'd like to take you for a ride on Sunday after church if you're willing. Show you my new property." "I'd like that," Bethany said. Henry hesitated, then slowly raised his hand to her face, his fingers brushing a loose tendril of hair behind her ear with exquisite gentleness. "Good night, Bethany Adams." "Good night, Henry Cooper," she whispered, her skin tingling where he'd touched her. She watched him walk away, a curious mixture of hope and trepidation swirling in her chest. For the first time since leaving the doctor's office, Bethany fell asleep without crying. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. Bethany taught her classes, attended her church circle's quilting session, and tried not to think constantly about Henry Cooper. She failed spectacularly at the latter. By Sunday morning, Bethany's anticipation had built to the point that she could barely focus on Reverend Matthew's sermon. When the service ended, she emerged into the bright New Mexico sunshine to find Henry waiting beside a gleaming buggy, Phoenix and a dappled mare harnessed in tandem. "Miss Adams," he greeted her formally, aware of the churchgoers streaming past. "Ready for our excursion?" Several of Deeming's matrons exchanged significant glances, while Mr. Campbell, the banker, paused to introduce himself to Henry with obvious curiosity. Bethany endured the scrutiny with as much dignity as she could muster, grateful when Henry finally handed her into the buggy, and they left the town behind. The road north of Deeming cut through typical New Mexico, terrain a landscape of browns and tans punctuated by the green of hardy desert plants, and the occasional splash of wildflowers. Mountains shimmered in the distance, their contours softened by heat haze. "It's beautiful out here," Bethany said as they left the last outbuildings behind. "Wait until you see the ranch," Henry replied, handling the horses with casual expertise. "There's a small rise that gives you a view of the whole valley." True to his word, after about 5 miles, Henry turned the buggy onto a rutted track that led to a modest but well-built ranch house nestled against a low hill. A barn and several outbuildings completed the homestead, all in good repair but clearly not new. Previous owner was a widower who decided to move back east to live with his daughter, Henry explained as he helped Bethany down. "Place has good bones, just needs some care." "It's wonderful," Bethany said sincerely, taking in the solid construction and the beautiful setting. "How much land comes with it?" 640 acres, Henry said. "Not the biggest spread, but good water rights and enough grazing for the herd I plan to build." He gave her a tour of the house, 6 rooms, including a surprisingly spacious kitchen with a proper cast iron stove, a comfortable parlor, a study, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. The furniture was sparse but serviceable. "Needs a woman's touch," Henry said as they stood in the empty parlor. "But it has potential." Something in his tone made Bethany glance at him sharply, but his expression gave nothing away. After touring the house, Henry showed her the barn, introduced her to the 4 horses already in residence, and then suggested they climb the hill behind the house for the view he'd promised. The hill was steeper than it appeared, and Bethany was grateful for Henry's steadying hand as they navigated the rocky path. At the summit, she gasped at the panorama spread before them, the ranch buildings below, the vast sweep of rangeland stretching toward distant mountains, the ribbon of road leading back to Deeming. "It's breathtaking," she said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I thought so too the first time I saw it," Henry agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I could imagine building a life here." Bethany glanced at him, struck by the quiet intensity in his voice. "You've traveled so much. Are you sure you're ready to settle in one place?" "I've been searching for the right place for a long time," Henry said. "Sometimes you just know when you've found it." His gaze held hers, and Bethany had the distinct impression he wasn't only talking about the ranch. She looked away first, unsettled by the warmth blooming in her chest. "Tell me about your plans for the ranch," she said, changing the subject. Henry accepted the deflection gracefully, outlining his intentions to raise horses along with cattle. "Good horseflesh is always in demand, especially with the railroad coming. And this land has everything I need to make it work." They spent the afternoon exploring the property, sharing a picnic lunch Henry had packed, and talking with an ease that belied their short acquaintance. By the time they headed back to town, the sun was setting, painting the desert in golds and crimsons. "Thank you for today," Bethany said as they approached Deeming. "It was wonderful to escape town for a while." "My pleasure," Henry replied, "though I hope it wasn't just about escaping town." Bethany smiled. No, the company was definitely a major factor. Henry's answering smile made her heart flutter. "Good, because I'd like to see you again, soon." And so began a courtship that set Deeming's gossips buzzing with speculation. Henry divided his time between establishing his ranch and calling on Bethany. They attended church together, dined at the hotel, and took long walks at sunset. When Henry's work kept him at the ranch, he would ride into town just to have coffee with Bethany after she finished teaching. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Henry found Bethany at the schoolhouse grading arithmetic papers. He knocked on the open door, his hat in his hands. "Henry," she greeted him with pleasure, "I wasn't expecting you today." "I finished mending fences earlier than planned," he explained, crossing to her desk. I thought you might join me for dinner." "I'd love to," Bethany said, gathering her papers. "Just let me finish marking these and actually," Henry interrupted, "I was hoping you might come out to the ranch. I've prepared dinner there." Bethany hesitated. Visiting an unmarried man's home alone would be scandalous by deeming standards. Henry read her concern immediately. "I've asked Mrs. Diaz from town to come cook and serve as chaperone. Her husband dropped her off an hour ago." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Bethany agreed. The ride to the ranch was filled with comfortable conversation about Henry's progress with the property and Bethany's adventures teaching the town's children. When they arrived, Bethany was astonished by the transformation of the house. The parlor now boasted a handsome settee, 2 comfortable chairs, and colorful rugs that warmed the wooden floors. Curtains hung at the windows, and a bookshelf held an impressive collection of volumes. "Henry, this is wonderful," she exclaimed, turning in a circle to take it all in. "When did you do all this?" "Been working on it bit by bit," he said, looking pleased at her reaction. "Ordered most of it from back east. The last pieces arrived yesterday. Mrs. Diaz, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, served them an excellent dinner of roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie." Throughout the meal, Bethany noticed Henry watching her with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. After dinner with Mrs. Diaz discreetly busy in the kitchen, Henry led Bethany to the parlor where a small fire chased away the evening chill. "There's something I want to talk to you about," he said, his usual confidence tempered with an unfamiliar nervousness. Bethany sat on the new settee, smoothing her skirts. "What is it?" Henry remained standing, pacing slightly before the fire. "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I can remember," he began, "getting to know you, spending time with you." Bethany's heart began to race. "I've enjoyed it too," she said softly. "Bethany, I know we haven't known each other long, but sometimes—" Henry took a deep breath. "Sometimes you just know when something is right." He crossed to where she sat and, to her astonishment, dropped to one knee before her. "I'm falling in love with you, Bethany Adams. I think I started falling the moment you almost walked under Phoenix's hooves." Bethany's eyes filled with tears. "Henry, I know what you're going to say," he continued, taking her hands in his, "about the doctor's diagnosis, about children. How could you want to marry me knowing I can't give you a family?" Bethany whispered, a tear spilling down her cheek. Henry reached up to brush it away with his thumb. "First, I don't accept that as final. There are other doctors, other opinions. But second," he continued firmly, "even if it is true, there are children who need homes, who need love." "You would consider that?" Bethany asked, hardly daring to hope. "I would consider anything that would make you happy," Henry said simply. "Because I want to build a life with you, Bethany. Whatever that life looks like." Fresh tears spilled down Bethany's cheeks, but these were different from the bitter tears she'd shed in Dr. White's office. These were tears of a hope she had thought forever lost. "Henry Cooper," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm falling in love with you too." Henry's face lit with such joy that Bethany's heart seemed to expand in her chest. "Then will you marry me? Become my wife, my partner in building this ranch and whatever future God has in store for us?" "Yes," Bethany whispered, then louder, "Yes, I will marry you." Henry surged to his feet, pulling her up with him and into an embrace that lifted her off her feet. When he set her down, his blue eyes were suspiciously bright. "You've made me the happiest man in New Mexico territory," he said. "And you've given me back hope," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "When we met, I thought my dreams were over." Henry's expression grew serious. "Bethany, I meant what I said about seeking another medical opinion. Will you let me arrange it? There's a doctor in Santa Fe who trained in Europe. I've heard he's skilled with women's complaints." Bethany nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll go. But Henry, we must be prepared for him to confirm Dr. White's diagnosis. Then we'll face that together, Henry promised. But I believe in fighting for what matters. Their engagement announcement sent ripples through Deeming's social circles. While most citizens offered congratulations, Bethany was aware of the whispers about the whirlwind courtship, about Henry's mysterious past, about her own suitability as a rancher's wife. Dr. White was among those who expressed reservations. He cornered Bethany outside the Mercantile one afternoon, his expression grave. "Miss Adams, I understand congratulations are in order," he said, his tone suggesting anything but felicitations. "Thank you, Dr. White," Bethany replied coolly. "Does your intended know about your condition?" The doctor asked, lowering his voice. "Mr. Cooper knows everything about me," Bethany said, lifting her chin, "and he still wishes to proceed with this marriage." Dr. White pressed, skepticism clear in his voice. "He does," Bethany confirmed, irritation rising at the doctor's presumption. "Well," Dr. White said with an unpleasant smile, "I suppose some men are content with a barren wife, though I wonder if his ardor will cool when the reality of your limitations becomes clear." The cruel words struck Bethany like physical blows. Before she could formulate a response, a large shadow fell across them. Dr. White, Henry's deep voice was controlled but edged with steel. "I believe you're upsetting my fiancée." The doctor straightened, clearly intimidated by Henry's imposing presence. "Mr. Cooper, I was merely expressing concern for Miss Adams' well-being." "Were you?" Henry stepped closer to the doctor, his blue eyes cold. "Because it sounded like you were insulting the woman I love." Dr. White took an involuntary step back. "I meant no offense. As her physician, I felt obligated. Your obligation to Miss Adams ended when you delivered your diagnosis," Henry interrupted. "And I'll thank you to keep your opinions about our marriage to yourself." The doctor's face flushed with anger, but he clearly thought better of challenging Henry further. With a curt nod, he continued down the street. "Are you all right?" Henry asked Bethany, his voice immediately softening. Bethany nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "Yes." "Thank you for intervening." "What did he say to upset you?" Henry asked, offering his arm to escort her away from curious onlookers. Bethany hesitated, then recounted the doctor's cruel insinuations. Henry's jaw tightened as he listened. "That man is fortunate, I believe, in civilized behavior," he said when she finished. "Bethany, you know I don't share his views, don't you?" "I do," she assured him. "But Henry, what if he's right? What if someday you regret marrying a woman who can't give you children?" Henry stopped walking and turned to face her, heedless of their public location. "Listen to me, Bethany Adams. I'm marrying you because I love you, your mind, your heart, your spirit. Children or no children, you are the woman I want to spend my life with. Do you understand?" His fierce declaration left Bethany speechless. She nodded, tears threatening again. "Good," Henry said, his voice gentling. "Now I have news. I've arranged an appointment with Dr. Lawrence in Santa Fe next week. Mrs. Campbell has agreed to accompany us as chaperone." The banker's wife had become an unexpected ally, apparently charmed by Henry's courteous manners and obvious devotion to Bethany. Her approval had helped silence some of the town's more vicious gossips. "So soon?" Bethany asked, anxiety mingling with anticipation. "No sense in waiting," Henry said. "The sooner we know what we're facing, the sooner we can make plans." The journey to Santa Fe took 3 days by stagecoach, with overnight stops at coaching inns along the route. Mrs. Campbell proved to be an excellent traveling companion, her practical nature and wry humor helping distract Bethany from her growing nervousness about the appointment. Santa Fe itself was a revelation much larger than Deeming, with beautiful adobe buildings, a magnificent church, and shops offering luxuries Bethany hadn't seen since leaving the East. Under different circumstances, she would have delighted in exploring the territorial capital. Dr. Frederick Lawrence's office was located in a handsome building near the plaza. Unlike Dr. White's cluttered, dusty space, this office was bright, clean, and organized. Dr. Lawrence himself was a surprise younger than Bethany had expected, with kind eyes and a reassuring manner that immediately put her at ease. "Miss Adams," he greeted her, shaking her hand. "And Mr. Cooper, Mrs. Campbell, please come in." He led them to a comfortable consultation room where he listened attentively as Bethany described her symptoms and Dr. White's diagnosis. He asked detailed questions that Dr. White had never bothered with, taking careful notes. "I'd like to examine you, Miss Adams," he said when she'd finished. "Mrs. Campbell can stay with you, of course." Henry squeezed Bethany's hand. "I'll wait right here," he promised. The examination was thorough but conducted with a gentleness and respect that Dr. White had never shown. When it was complete, Dr. Lawrence helped Bethany dress, then called Henry back into the room. "I've completed my examination," the doctor said once they were all seated. "And while I agree that Miss Adams has a condition that complicates childbearing, I disagree with Dr. White's absolute prognosis." Bethany's heart lurched. "What do you mean?" "You have what we call endometriosis," Dr. Lawrence explained. "It's a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the womb grows outside the womb. It can cause pain, irregular bleeding, and sometimes difficulties conceiving." Dr. White said it made childbearing impossible, Bethany said, hardly daring to hope. "Not impossible," Dr. Lawrence corrected. "More difficult, certainly, but I've had patients with your condition who have successfully carried children to term." Henry reached for Bethany's hand, squeezing it tightly. "What can be done?" he asked. "There are treatments that can help manage the symptoms," Dr. Lawrence said. "And sometimes the condition improves on its own with time. I can't promise you'll be able to have children, Miss Adams, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility." Tears of relief streamed down Bethany's face. "There's hope," she whispered. "There's hope," Dr. Lawrence confirmed with a smile. "I'll write out some recommendations for treatments, and I'd like to see you again in 6 months to assess your progress." When they left the doctor's office, Bethany felt as though a crushing weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Henry was unusually quiet as they escorted Mrs. Campbell back to their hotel, but his hand remained firmly clasped around Bethany's. Once Mrs. Campbell had retired to her room for a rest before dinner, Henry led Bethany to a small garden behind the hotel. The space was private, screened from the street by flowering shrubs and adobe walls. "What are you thinking?" Bethany asked when Henry remained silent, staring at the colorful blooms. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I'm thinking about what the doctor said." "About the possibility of children," Bethany said. "Henry, I know it's not a certainty, but—" "Bethany," he interrupted, taking both her hands in his. "I need you to understand something. I didn't bring you to Santa Fe because I needed you to be able to have children. I brought you because I couldn't bear to see you in such pain over something that might not even be true." "I know," Bethany said softly. "Dr. Lawrence's news is wonderful," Henry continued. "But it changes nothing about how I feel about you or my desire to marry you. If we're blessed with children, I'll be overjoyed. If not, I'll still be the happiest man alive because I'll have you as my wife." Overwhelmed by his sincerity, Bethany could only whisper, "I love you, Henry Cooper." Henry's face lit with a smile that took her breath away. "And I love you, Bethany Adams, soon to be Bethany Cooper." They returned to Deeming with renewed hope and plans for a wedding in 6 weeks' time. The entire town seemed caught up in the preparations, with the ladies of the church sewing a wedding quilt and the men helping Henry complete renovations on the ranch house. Bethany gave notice at the school, though she agreed to stay until the end of the term, just 2 weeks before the wedding. Her students presented her with a hand-drawn book of pictures and good wishes that brought tears to her eyes. As the wedding day approached, Bethany followed Dr. Lawrence's treatment recommendations faithfully. Already, she noticed a reduction in her monthly pain and fewer days of debilitating fatigue. The night before the wedding, Bethany sat on the front porch of her small house, surrounded by the belongings she would take to her new home the next day. The street was quiet, most of Deeming's citizens already retired for the evening. The only sounds were the distant piano from the Silver Dollar Saloon and the soft chirping of crickets. A movement at the gate caught her attention. Henry stood there, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlit street. "Henry," she called softly, rising to her feet, "what are you doing here? It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding." He came up the path, a smile playing at his lips. "That's just a superstition." "And I couldn't sleep, knowing tomorrow you'll be my wife." Bethany's heart fluttered at the tenderness in his voice. "Neither could I," she admitted. Henry took her hands, drawing her closer. "Are you happy, Bethany? Truly?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," she assured him. "6 weeks ago I thought my life was over. Now I feel like it's just beginning." Henry's expression grew serious. "There's something I need to tell you before tomorrow, something I should have said sooner." Alarmed by his tone, Bethany tensed. "What is it?" "It's about my past," Henry said. "About why I've moved around so much." He led her to the porch swing and sat beside her, still holding her hands. "After the war, I went back to Texas, but everything had changed. My parents were gone, our ranch taken for taxes. I drifted for a while, taking work where I could find it." Bethany nodded encouragingly, sensing this was difficult for him to share. "In Wyoming, I fell in love with a rancher's daughter," Henry continued. "Martha. We were engaged to be married when she fell ill with fever. She didn't survive." "Oh, Henry," Bethany whispered, squeezing his hands. "After that, I couldn't bear to stay," he said. "So I moved on. Montana next, then Colorado, but nowhere felt right. I was running, I suppose, from grief, from memories." "And then you came to Deeming," Bethany said softly. Henry nodded, his blue eyes intense in the dim light. "And then I met you, and for the first time in years I wanted to stop running. I wanted to build something lasting." "Thank you for telling me," Bethany said, touched by his honesty. "I'm so sorry about Martha." "I loved her," Henry said simply, "and losing her nearly broke me." "But Bethany, what I feel for you, it's different, deeper somehow, as if everything in my life, even the pain, was leading me to you." Bethany's eyes filled with tears at the raw emotion in his voice. "I feel the same way," she whispered. Henry leaned forward, his lips finding hers in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened into something more urgent. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. "I should go," Henry said, his voice husky, "before I forget all propriety." "Tomorrow," Bethany promised, touching his face. "Tomorrow," he agreed, pressing a final kiss to her palm before reluctantly taking his leave. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the October sky a brilliant blue above Deeming's small church. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, filling the pews to capacity and spilling onto the church steps. Bethany wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Campbell had helped her select on their Santa Fe trip, with a crown of desert wildflowers in her honey-brown hair. When the church doors opened and she began her walk down the aisle, the sight of Henry waiting for her at the altar, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his face alight with love, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Reverend Matthews conducted the service with dignified warmth, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers. Even Dr. White, sitting stiffly in the back row, managed a grudging nod of acknowledgement. The reception at the hotel was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and more food than Bethany had seen in one place since leaving Pennsylvania. As the celebration wound down, Henry whispered in her ear that it was time to depart for their new home. They left amid a shower of rice and good wishes, climbing into the buggy Henry had decorated with ribbons and flowers. Phoenix and the dappled mare, both sporting ribbons in their manes, trotted smartly through town and onto the road north. "Mrs. Cooper," Henry said as Deeming receded behind them. "How does it feel?" "Wonderful," Bethany replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Like a dream." "The best kind," Henry agreed. "One that's just beginning." When they reached the ranch, their home, Bethany gasped in delight. The house was ablaze with lantern light, and a banner reading "Welcome Home, Mrs. Cooper" hung above the door. Inside, fresh flowers filled every room, and a fire crackled welcomingly in the parlor hearth. "Henry, it's beautiful," she exclaimed, turning in a circle to take it all in. "Not half as beautiful as you," he replied, setting down her bags and drawing her into his arms. "I can't believe you're finally here, that you're my wife." Bethany's heart raced as he bent to kiss her, his arms tightening around her waist. This kiss was different from their previous ones, deeper, more urgent, without the restraint that propriety had demanded before. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I've been waiting for this moment since the day we met," he confessed. "So have I," Bethany admitted, her cheeks flushing at her own boldness. Henry's eyes darkened at her words. He swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the stairs. "Then let's not wait any longer, Mrs. Cooper." Later, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom window, Bethany lay in Henry's arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "Happy," he murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Perfectly," she sighed, tightening her arm across his torso. "Bethany," Henry said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "what Dr. White said to you that day at the Mercantile about my ardor cooling." Bethany stiffened slightly. "Henry, you don't need to, I do," he insisted gently. "I need you to know something." He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look into her eyes. "That man doesn't know the first thing about love, about commitment, about building a life together." Bethany reached up to touch his face, her heart full. "I made vows to you today," Henry continued, "for better, for worse. In sickness and in health, I meant every word." "I know you did," Bethany whispered. "So did I." Henry's expression softened into a smile that made her heart skip. "Good, because I plan to spend the rest of our lives proving him wrong." He lowered his mouth to hers once more, and Bethany surrendered to the love she had never expected to find. The months that followed were the happiest of Bethany's life. She threw herself into learning to be a rancher's wife, managing the household accounts, preserving foods for winter, and even helping with the livestock when extra hands were needed. Henry hired 2 reliable ranch hands, brothers named Jose and Miguel Ruiz, who lived in the bunkhouse and quickly became like family. Following Dr. Lawrence's recommendations, Bethany's health steadily improved. The debilitating pain that had once confined her to bed for days each month gradually lessened, and her energy increased. Still, as their first anniversary approached, she had not conceived. "It's only been a year," Henry reassured her when he found her crying one evening after her monthly course had started. "Dr. Lawrence said it might take time." "I know," Bethany said, wiping her tears. "I just want to give you a child so badly." Henry gathered her into his arms. "We'll have a family, Bethany, one way or another. But I need you to understand something. You are enough. Just you. If it's only ever the two of us, I will still count myself the luckiest man alive." His unwavering love sustained her through the disappointments. And there was much joy to balance the sorrow. The ranch was prospering, with Henry's careful management turning it into one of the most successful operations in the county. Their home had become a warm and welcoming place, often filled with friends from town and neighboring ranches. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Bethany accompanied Henry to Santa Fe for the livestock auction and another appointment with Dr. Lawrence. The doctor was pleased with her progress. "Your condition has definitely improved," he told her after examining her. "The treatments are working well." "But I still haven't conceived," Bethany said, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Dr. Lawrence nodded sympathetically. "I understand your frustration, Mrs. Cooper. But I've seen cases like yours where conception occurred after 2 or 3 years of treatment. Patience is difficult, I know, but there's still every reason for hope." On their return journey, they stopped overnight at a small settlement where the stagecoach line maintained a station. As they checked into the modest hotel, they noticed a commotion down the street. "What's happening?" Henry asked the hotel clerk. "Orphan train arrived yesterday," the man replied. "Brought a dozen children from back east. Most have been placed with local families, but there are a few still at the church hall waiting." Bethany and Henry exchanged a glance, both thinking of their conversations about adoption. "Perhaps we could visit," Bethany suggested hesitantly, "just to see." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. After dinner, the church hall was a simple wooden building lit by oil lamps. Inside, 3 children remained: 2 boys about 10 years old who were clearly brothers, and a tiny girl of perhaps 3 who sat alone on a bench, clutching a worn rag doll. A harried-looking woman in a severe black dress approached them. "May I help you? We heard about the orphan train," Henry explained. "We thought we might." He trailed off, glancing at Bethany. "Are you looking to take one of the children?" the woman asked, her expression brightening. "The Mendoza brothers, they are good workers, despite their age. They could be useful on a farm." But Bethany's attention was fixed on the little girl, whose large brown eyes watched them with solemn curiosity. "What about her?" she asked softly. The woman's expression dimmed. "Ah, little Sarah. Difficult case, I'm afraid. Mother died in childbirth, father recently of consumption, no other family. She's very shy, hardly speaks." As if drawn by an invisible thread, Bethany crossed to the bench and knelt before the child. "Hello, Sarah," she said gently. "My name is Bethany." "That's a lovely doll you have." The girl clutched the doll tighter but didn't look away. "Her name is Molly," she whispered after a long moment. "Molly is a beautiful name," Bethany said, smiling. "Does she like stories? I love stories." A tiny nod was her only answer. Henry joined them, crouching beside Bethany. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his deep voice softened to avoid frightening the child. "I'm Henry." Sarah studied him with the same solemn intensity. "You're tall," she observed in her small voice. Henry chuckled. "Yes, I suppose I am." Something in the child's vulnerable solemnity touched Bethany's heart in a way she couldn't explain. She glanced at Henry, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded, understanding without words. "Miss," he called to the woman, "might we speak with you privately?" 2 days later, they left the settlement with Sarah asleep in Henry's arms as the stagecoach rocked along the rutted road toward Deeming. The necessary paperwork had been completed with surprising speed, helped by Henry's standing as a successful rancher and a letter of recommendation from Reverend Matthews that they fortunately had with them. "You think she'll be happy with us?" Bethany whispered, watching the child's peaceful face. "We'll do everything in our power to make sure of it," Henry promised. "She's ours now, Bethany, our daughter." Sarah's arrival at the Cooper Ranch caused a sensation in Deeming. The women of the church immediately organized a welcome party with gifts of clothing, toys, and books for the new arrival. Sarah, initially overwhelmed by the attention, gradually began to emerge from her shell under Bethany's patient care and Henry's gentle encouragement. By summer's end, the solemn, silent child had transformed into a curious, chattering little girl who followed Henry around the ranch and helped Bethany in the kitchen. Her nightly plea of "Tell me a story, Mama," never failed to bring tears to Bethany's eyes. One evening in early autumn, as Bethany tucked Sarah into bed, the child asked, "Are you and Papa going to have a baby?" Startled by the question, Bethany hesitated. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Mrs. Ruiz is having a baby," Sarah explained, referring to Miguel's young wife who lived in town. "Her tummy is getting big. Will your tummy get big too someday?" Bethany smoothed Sarah's dark curls from her forehead. "I don't know, darling. Papa and I would like to have a baby someday, but sometimes these things aren't up to us." Sarah considered this seriously. "If you do have a baby, will you still love me?" "Oh, Sarah," Bethany gathered the child into her arms. "Papa and I will love you forever and ever, no matter what happens. You're our daughter, our precious girl." Sarah seemed satisfied with this answer and soon drifted off to sleep. Bethany sat watching her for a long time, marveling at how completely this child had captured her heart. When she finally descended to the parlor, she found Henry reading by the fire. He looked up with a smile that still made her heart skip. "She's asleep?" he asked, setting aside his book. Bethany nodded, settling beside him on the settee. "She asked if we were going to have a baby." Henry's eyebrows rose. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," Bethany said. "That we'd like to, but it might not happen, and that we'll love her always, no matter what." Henry pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Perfect answer." Bethany relaxed against him, enjoying the quiet moment. "Henry, I've been thinking, maybe we should go back to Santa Fe, see Dr. Lawrence again." "Whatever you want," Henry agreed immediately. "But are you sure?" "I thought we agreed to wait until spring." Bethany nodded slowly. "I know, but something feels different. I'm not sure how to explain it." Henry studied her face. "Different how? I'm late," Bethany admitted. "Only by a few days, and it's happened before, but—" She hesitated, hardly daring to voice her hope. "I feel different this time." Henry's expression shifted from concern to cautious optimism. "Bethany, are you saying—" "I don't know," she said quickly. "I don't want to hope too much, but maybe." Henry pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Then we'll wait," he said. "Together. And whatever comes, we'll face it as we have everything else." 2 weeks later, when there was no longer any doubt, Bethany told Henry the news she had scarcely dared to hope for. His whoop of joy brought Sarah running from where she'd been playing with her dolls, and together they shared the news that their family would be growing. The pregnancy was not easy. Bethany's condition meant frequent discomfort and worrying episodes of spotting that sent Henry racing for the doctor more than once. But with each passing month, the tiny life inside her grew stronger, and Bethany's joy outweighed her fears. Sarah approached her impending big sister status with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, asking endless questions about the baby and where it would sleep and whether it would like her. "The baby will love you," Bethany assured her, guiding Sarah's small hand to feel the movement beneath her rounded belly. "Just like Papa and I do." By the time the harsh New Mexico winter gave way to spring, Bethany was in her final month, her small frame seeming hardly able to contain the new life within. Dr. White, who had gradually come to respect the Coopers despite his initial skepticism, visited regularly to monitor her condition. "You've proven me wrong, Mrs. Cooper," he admitted during one such visit. "I wouldn't have believed it possible." My husband never doubted, Bethany replied, sharing a smile with Henry, who hadn't left her side during the examination. Yes, well, the doctor harumphed, gathering his instruments. You're fortunate in your choice of husband. Don't I know it? Bethany agreed, her smile widening at Henry's embarrassed cough. The labor began on a warm April evening as Henry read to Sarah and Bethany mended by the fire. The first pain was so sharp it made her gasp, the needle slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. Henry was at her side instantly. "Is it time?" he asked, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. Bethany nodded, unable to speak as another contraction seized her. Henry sprang into action, sending one of the ranch hands to fetch Dr. White and Mrs. Campbell, who had promised to help with the birth. Sarah watched with wide, frightened eyes as Henry carried Bethany upstairs. "Is Mama hurt?" she asked, her lower lip trembling. "No, sweetheart," Henry assured her, returning to scoop her up. "Mama is having the baby. It's hard work, but Dr. White will help her." He settled Sarah with Mrs. Ruiz, who had come to keep the child company during the birth, then returned to Bethany's side. The hours that followed tested them both. Bethany's labor was long and difficult, her small frame struggling to deliver the child. "She's too weak," Dr. White murmured to Mrs. Campbell at one point, not realizing Henry could hear. "I fear we may lose them both." "Don't you dare say that," Henry growled, startling the doctor. "My wife is the strongest person I know. She'll bring our child into this world, and you'll do everything in your power to help her." The doctor nodded, chastened by Henry's fierce faith. As dawn broke over the New Mexico desert, painting the bedroom walls with golden light, Bethany gave one final, exhausted push, and their son slipped into the world with a lusty cry that seemed to proclaim his triumph over all odds. "A boy, Doctor," White announced, his professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine pleasure. "A fine, healthy boy." Henry, who had refused to leave Bethany's side throughout the ordeal, pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "You did it," he whispered. "You amazing, incredible woman." Bethany reached for her son with trembling arms. "Let me see him," she begged. Mrs. Campbell placed the swaddled infant on Bethany's chest. He was perfect, a thatch of dark hair like Henry's, Bethany's delicate nose, tiny fingers that curled reflexively around his father's much larger one when Henry reached to touch him. "Hello, William," Bethany whispered, using the name they had chosen to honor Henry's father. "We've been waiting for you." When Sarah was finally allowed to enter, her eyes wide with wonder at the tiny bundle in her mother's arms, the Cooper family was complete. The little girl climbed carefully onto the bed, her expression solemn as she studied her new brother. "He's so small," she whispered. "But he'll grow," Henry assured her, lifting her onto his lap so she could see better. "And he'll need his big sister to help him learn everything he needs to know." Sarah's face lit with a smile that warmed Bethany's exhausted heart. "I can do that," she said confidently. As the morning sun climbed higher, bathing the bedroom in golden light, Bethany looked around at her family. Henry, his face etched with love and pride. Sarah, already taking her big sister duties seriously. And baby William, a miracle she had once believed impossible. "I love you," Henry murmured, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to her lips. "All of you, my family." Bethany smiled up at the man who had given her back hope when she thought all was lost. "Remember what Dr. White said," she asked softly, "that I'd never be a mother." Henry's blue eyes sparkled with the memory. "I believe I told you I'd prove him wrong." "And you did," Bethany whispered, cradling her son closer. "You certainly did." 5 years later, the Cooper Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The railroad had indeed come to Deeming, bringing growth and opportunity just as Henry had predicted. Their herd numbered over 500 head of cattle, and Henry's reputation for breeding fine horses had spread throughout the Southwest. The family had grown as well. William, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's height and his mother's gentle nature, had been joined by 3-year-old twins, James and Elizabeth. Sarah, at 11, was the proud big sister, already showing a talent for teaching that reminded Bethany of her own younger self. On a warm summer evening, as the children played in the yard under the watchful eye of Mrs. Ruiz's teenage daughter, Bethany and Henry sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant golds and purples. "Happy?" Henry asked, his arm around her shoulders just as he had that first night in their home. "Completely," Bethany replied, leaning into his embrace. "I was thinking about the day we met, how lost I felt, how hopeless." Henry pressed a kiss to her temple, his dark hair now lightly threaded with silver at the temples that only made him more handsome in Bethany's eyes. "And now," Bethany smiled, watching as William helped little Elizabeth climb onto the wooden horse Henry had carved. Sarah supervised with all the dignity of her 11 years, while James tried to sneak away toward the barn, always the adventurer. "Now I know that hope is never really lost," she said softly. "Just sometimes hard to see." Henry followed her gaze to their children, his expression softening. "They're something, aren't they, our family?" "Our miracle," Bethany agreed, "all of them." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a final blaze of glory, Bethany thought of all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment, the diagnosis that had seemed like an ending but had actually been a beginning, the chance meeting with a kind stranger who became the love of her life, the journey that had led them to Sarah, then to William, and finally to the twins. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Henry asked, his voice gentle in the gathering dusk. Bethany turned to him, to the face she had loved for 7 years and would love for all the years to come. "I was thinking that sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the brightest light. If I hadn't been so devastated that day, I might never have walked into the path of your horse." Henry chuckled, the sound as warm and comforting as it had been the first time she heard it. "Then I suppose we owe Dr. White some gratitude after all." "Perhaps," Bethany conceded with a smile. "Though I still prefer your diagnosis to his." Henry drew her closer, his lips finding hers in a kiss that, even after 7 years of marriage, still made her heart race. "And what diagnosis was that, Mrs. Cooper?" he murmured against her lips. Bethany smiled, remembering his words on that long-ago night. "That some things people say can't be fixed, just haven't met the right person willing to try." In the yard, their children's laughter rose like music on the evening breeze, the sound of joy, of family, of promises kept and dreams fulfilled. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Bethany Cooper sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the man who had refused to believe in impossibilities, who had given her not just children, but a life filled with love beyond anything she had ever dared to hope for.